Part 16. The School Sweetheart Soft Green Plum is Sweet and Wild. Author, Pearfish. Chapter 151. Chapter 151. She has always been the only one who can influence him. It doesn't matter what others think of him, what matters is this girl's attitude towards him. After all, others will not affect his life. She has always been the only one who can affect him. Looning, haha. Seeing that he can still laugh, it shows that he is not too angry. Actually, she was right. I was not a good student before. It's normal for her to look down on me, although using rat to describe him sounds unpleasant, it is still true. After all, he had caused the class to have points deducted many times before. Thinking about it this way, the former head teacher was indeed a good teacher. Although I often scolded him, I still didn't give up on him. Coming out of the office, he saw Shen Yu and the others guarding outside. "Why are you guys here?" Lu Xian put his hands in his pockets and walked forward slowly. Shen Yu glanced at Lu Ning behind him, smiled and said, "Don't you want to know how the matter was resolved?" It was obvious from the look on the third brother's face that he was dissatisfied with the results of the class placement, and the other person went there again. "It's an office." Everyone knew that it must be for class division. They also wanted to know the results as soon as possible before following. "Lu Xian, nothing happened. I was assigned to the second class." Everyone's attention immediately fell on Lu Ning. "Then you and Sister Ning are not in the same class." After all, they all know that the third brother worked hard to get into the key liberal arts class for Sister Ning. He even went to tutoring classes during the summer vacation just to catch up with Sister Ning. Now that one is in class 1 and the other is in class 2, wouldn't the third brother's efforts during this period have been in vain? "It's okay, this girl has also applied to be transferred to the second shift." Lu Xian glanced at Lu Ning, with a pleasant smile on his lips, and a bit of pride in his tone. "Ning Ning, you don't want me anymore." Jian Nian on the side heard the words and immediately widened his eyes and looked at the other party with a somewhat resentful tone. I was so focused on venting my anger for someone that I forgot about the other person." "I'm sorry." Lu Ning looked at the other party. She knew that Jian Nian was happy because she was assigned to the same class as her, but she suddenly said that she wanted to change classes, which made her feel like she was leaving her friend behind. But now that everyone has been offended and the words have been released, it is too late to regret it. Furthermore, she really didn't like the way the devil was doing things. Although the shift change was a temporary decision, she had no intention of taking it back now that she had said it. However, although the female devil's teaching ethics are not very good, her teaching level is still very good, otherwise she would not be assigned to teach key classes. Furthermore, I heard that the other party is very strict and attaches great importance to ranking, which is not entirely a bad thing for students. If it weren't for what happened today, she would never have thought of changing shifts. Forget it. Jian Nian's eyes swept over her and Lu Xian. Although the other party's behavior was a bit more sexual than friendship, who could let herself be their CP fan? "Although I can't continue to sit at the same table with Ning Ning, it's not bad to be able to keep eating CP. And since the two classes are close together, they will be able to see each other often in the future." Jian Nian felt relieved after thinking about it. "I forgive you," she said, "but you have to promise me that you will still have to eat with me at noon from now on." Fortunately, the two classes are right next to each other, so it will be convenient to meet in the future. "Okay," Lu Ning agreed. Lu Xian on the side is not happy. This girl is accompanying him to dinner, what should he do? End of this chapter. The School Sweetheart Soft Green Plum is Sweet and Wild. Author, Pearfish. Chapter 152. Chapter 152. Not reserved at all. Seeing this, Shen Yu on the side stepped forward and hugged the other party's shoulders and said, "It's okay, third brother. Sister Ning will eat with Jian Nian, and I will eat with you. Yes, yes, there are us, and we will eat with you. The statement was not far behind. Go away, who wants you to accompany us? Lucien glanced at the two of them with disgust, and then looked at Lu Ning. It's boring for two people to eat together. Of course, it's more fun when there are more people eating together. Lu Ning twitched the corner of her mouth speechlessly. It's just a canteen, not going out to eat, so what's the point of being lively? There are so many people in the canteen, isn't it lively enough? Office. The head teacher of Liberal Arts Class 2 was very happy when he heard that Lu Ning was going to be transferred to his class. Every teacher likes good students. Although I don't know what happened, it is always a good thing for their class. But she heard Yin Swimei say angrily from the side, Teacher Li, I advise you to think carefully. Are you sure you want a student who is so disobedient and openly contradicts the teacher to be in your class? Isn't this impossible? The head teacher of the second liberal arts class, whose surname is Li, is Li Su. Hearing this, he said, I have seen this little girl. She looks gentle and quiet. She doesn't look like what you said, Teacher Yin. Do you think I'm deliberately smearing her? Yin Swimei felt furious when she saw that the other party didn't believe what she said, and her voice suddenly became louder. Li Su was startled by the other party's reaction. Teacher Yin, I didn't mean that. He didn't know what the little girl had done to make him so popular. Yin Swimei also realized that she had lost her composure, but when she thought of Lu Ning's attitude towards her, she still felt a lump in her chest. She said with a sullen face, that's just because you haven't seen her true face. You don't want to think about it either. Why did she suddenly want to be transferred from my class to yours? It was because she just contradicted me in the office, and I just gave her a few words. The little girl was so angry that she said she wanted to change classes. Today's students are nothing like we used to be. They have no respect for their teachers at all and can scold them casually. I can't control such a student anyway, and I don't want to control it. If you are willing to accept it, Mr. Li, I naturally have no objection. I am just giving you a vaccination in advance to prevent you from being angry with the student in the future. It is more like eye drops than a vaccination. It was obviously Lu Ning who took the initiative to change classes, but from what the other party said, it sounded like she didn't want Lu Ning. Oh, by the way, there is also Lucien in your class. Teacher Li had better pay more attention to it. The relationship between these two students seems to be unusual. I think they are quite close, and now they have gone to great lengths to move to the same class. Maybe you are thinking about it? Girls nowadays are not reserved at all. You don't even know if two people fall in love right under your nose. You also know that students of this age have active minds, and puppy love is prohibited in our school. If a student in the class is caught having puppy love, and something happens, the parents will find it, and it will become the fault of our class teacher. Wrong. It is obvious that their parents failed to educate their children well, and if anything goes wrong, the entire responsibility will be placed on the teacher. Together with our teachers, we will take the blame for their parents. I kindly remind you for the sake of my colleagues. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The School Sweetheart Soft Green Plum is Sweet and Wild. Author, Pearfish. Chapter 153. Chapter 153 Ignorant Feelings. Thank you, Teacher Yin, for reminding me. I will pay more attention. Li Su couldn't help but frowned when he heard this. As a teacher, the last thing you want to see is for a good student to fall in love prematurely. It's not that there is anything wrong with falling in love early. After all, I was young myself, so I understand. Emotions are something that is not easy to control no matter what age you are. Those that can be controlled may not be called emotions. Especially in adolescence, it is the time when a group of boys and girls are first in love. They get along with each other day and night, and it is easier for them to develop ignorant feelings. It's just that students of this age are not mentally mature and can easily be affected by their emotions, thus affecting their learning. Over the years of teaching, he has seen too many students who went from being excellent to plummeting due to puppy love. It always makes people sad and regretful. Originally, he was quite happy that there was a good talent in the class, but after hearing what the other person said, he had to take it seriously. If the two of them really have signs of that, they must stop it as soon as possible. At this time, Lucian and Lu Ning didn't know that they had been included in the key observation targets. After reading the class schedule, the next step is to register for your new class. However, they have already decided to change shifts, and Lu Ning does not plan to report to class 1 again. Ning Ning, what should you do? Seeing everyone starting to go to the new classroom, Jian Nian couldn't help but look at Lu Ning. Lu Ning smiled at her and said, "It's okay. You go ahead. I'll go to the office later to ask about the shift change." "Okay, I'll go first then." Jian Nian wasn't worried about her. Anyway, the girl's grades were so good that she wasn't worried that the class teacher of class 2 would not want her. "Let's go," Lucian greeted Lu Ning when everyone was almost gone. "Where to go?" Lu Ning raised her head and looked at the other party. Lucian put a hand on her shoulder and said, "Have you decided to go to class 2 with me?" "Of course I will report to class 2. "Well, what if the head teacher of class 2 disagrees?" Lu Ning frowned and refused. "Why don't you agree?" Lucian raised his eyebrows. "You are not a rat in the eyes of teachers like me. Those teachers are all human beings. I wish there were more good students like you to help them raise their average scores." Lu Ning decided to go to the office to ask about the situation first. Just as she was about to go to the office, she saw the class teacher of the second grade liberal arts class walking over with a sign-in form. When he passed by her, he suddenly stopped and looked at her and said, "Classmate Lu Ning. I am Li Su, the head teacher of the second grade liberal arts class. I heard you want to transfer to our class, right?" Lu Ning saluted slightly and said, "Hello, teacher, this is it. I wonder if it's okay." "Of course, come with me." The latter nodded, then his eyes fell on Lucian's hand on Lu Ning's shoulder, and he frowned slightly. It seems that Teacher Yin's words are true. The relationship between the two children is indeed unusual and a bit too close. You have to find time to have a good chat with them. However, school has just started, and as a class teacher, he still has a lot of work. I plan to wait until everyone has adapted to the new class situation. I immediately withdrew my gaze and continued walking in the direction of the class. Lucian turned to Lu Ning and said, "What do you think? No teacher would reject a good student like you. Your worries are completely unnecessary." End of this chapter. The School Sweetheart Soft Green Plum is Sweet and Wild. Author, Pearfish. Chapter 154. Chapter 154. As long as I am here, the position next to you must be mine. Lu Ning slapped his hand off her shoulder. She had noticed Li Su's special look just now. It seems that I need to remind this guy not to get involved all the time in the future, otherwise it will be bad if the new class teacher misunderstands the two as having a puppy love. Of course, her reminder must be useful. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but turn his head and glance at Lucian. The latter met her gaze and said, "What's wrong?" "Forget it, it's nothing." If this guy had listened to her, he wouldn't be Lucian. And now is not the time to say this. "Let's go," she said. The people in class 2 were both surprised and curious about Lu Ning's sudden appearance in the class. After all, everyone is familiar with the little fairy who is the top student, and her name is posted on the first page of the class list, and many people have seen it. When he suddenly saw the other party appear in his class, especially when he walked in with Lucian, the class was immediately in a state of panic. The first reaction is that the other person is in the wrong classroom. Li Su knocked on the table, signaling for everyone to be quiet, and said, "Okay, everyone, please be quiet. This is Luning, who will also be in our class from now on." Luning did very well in the final exam last semester. If you encounter problems in your studies in the future, if you have any questions, you can also ask Luning for help. Then he looked at Luning and Lucian and said, "You two should also find a seat and sit down." Seeing the two of them sitting together as a matter of course, Li Su started to have a headache again. It seems that we need to find a time to talk to them as soon as possible. As for the people in the class, they were speculating about the two of them. After all, during the summer vacation, many people had heard the rumors about Luning and Song Tingzi's relationship, and it was no secret that Luning and Lucian had a good relationship. Originally I thought it was Song Ting who came after him and snatched Luning away from Lucian. Many people have even secretly speculated about this love triangle drama in their hearts. But now, looking at the two people's posture, it seems that they have not fallen out, and their relationship is still as before. For a while, I can't help but start to wonder whether the previous rumors are true or false. Luning looked into the eyes of everyone who were looking at her, with a calm expression. After all, in recent years, because of her close relationship with Lucian, many people have speculated on her. Since school had just started, Li Su didn't know everyone well, so he didn't rush to adjust his seat. Instead, we are telling everyone that we will wait until after the first monthly exam of the semester to make the first round of seat adjustments. From now on, adjustments will be made at the end of each round of monthly exams. It is up to them to decide where they can sit. He will let everyone choose the seat they like based on the ranking of each monthly exam. In other words, students who do well in the exam have priority. Everyone was very happy after hearing this. At least they still have the right to choose, which is better than being directly arranged by the head teacher. Of course, students with better grades will be happier because they will have more opportunities to choose. Lucian glanced at Luning and said, "Come on, whether we can be roommates depends entirely on you." Luning corrected him, "You are wrong. I can only decide where I sit. As for where you can sit, and whether we can be seatmates, it doesn't depend on me but on you. After all, everyone can only decide. Wherever you are, you can't decide who your desk mate is. If someone else chooses the seat next to her first, she can't drive them away. Lucian, don't worry, as long as I'm here, the seat next to you will definitely be mine." The School Sweetheart Soft Green Plum is Sweet and Wild. Author, Pearfish. Chapter 155. Chapter 155. My thoughts are written on my face. Luning raised her eyebrows and looked at him and said, "What if someone else chooses you, can you still drive them away?" If he really did that, I'm afraid the head teacher would have to talk to him. Why not? If there were two people in the same class, and he could let someone else take the seat next to her, then he could write the words Lucian backwards. Luning, you got into the experimental class with great difficulty, so don't mess around, Luning warned him worriedly. Because of his previous performance, he has been registered with teachers in various subjects. What's more, entering the experimental class is not foolproof. Number 1 Middle School will arrange monthly exams every month. If he fails to take the exam 3 times in a row, he will be dismissed. After being kicked out of the experimental class, it was still unclear whether he could stay. If he causes any trouble during this period, he might be requested from the experimental class without waiting until after the 3rd monthly exam. Don't worry, I'm sensible, just wait and see how well I perform in the monthly exam in 1 month. After all, a summer tutoring class is not for nothing. He knew that the female devil surnamed Yin was still waiting to see his jokes. She had to make a point even if she didn't steam the steamed buns. He had yet to decide on this experimental class. Li Su couldn't help but feel heartbroken when he saw Luning and Lucian sitting in the corner. However, the positions of the others had not been adjusted. He couldn't just adjust the positions of the two of them, otherwise it would look like he was deliberately targeting them. However, thinking that the monthly exam in a month will separate the two people, this makes them less entangled. What Li Su thought was that since the little girl had good grades and was pretty, there would definitely be many people who wanted to sit at the same table with her. In this way, the boy named Lu would not be able to take the position next to her. As for Lu Xian, although I don't know why he made so much progress in such a short period of time, he was admitted to the experimental class from the bottom of his grade. It was probably due to luck. But after all, you won't be so lucky every time. If the other person doesn't have real talent and learning, he will be kicked out of the key class sooner or later. Even if the other party can stay, with his current ranking in the class, he is only ranked in the middle and lower places. It is not easy to sit next to the little girl. Unless he can make more progress, in which case he can turn a blind eye. The matter of class division was thus decided. Lu Xian was in the same class as Lu Ning as expected, and he could feel his good mood even when walking and eating. But basically in self-entertainment mode. Looking at his triumphant expression, Zhu Shu couldn't help but tease him, "Tisk tisk, people are really in high spirits during happy events." Looking at third brother's look, he must have been very happy recently, right? "Yes, I can be with him every day. If it were me, I would be happy too." "Ahem, what are you talking about?" Although he was indeed quite proud, he had to keep a low profile. She winked at him and said, "Third brother, stop pretending. Everyone knows that you like Sister Ning. It's now, don't you still deny it?" Lu Xian. "Is it that obvious?" Statement, "I can't say it's obvious, it's quite obvious. Anyone with eyes can see how much the third brother cares about Sister Ning. It's almost not written clearly on his face." "So, when are you two planning to announce your relationship?" In their opinion, Sister Ning transferred to the second class for third brother, and they probably also like third brother. Lu Xian glanced at him, "It's nothing, why are you so anxious?" End of this chapter. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The School Sweetheart Soft Green Plum is sweet and wild. Author, Pearfish. Chapter 156. Chapter 156, Lovelorn Men Cannot Be Offended. He thought, that would only happen if someone is willing to nod. How can we announce the relationship if we haven't even confirmed the relationship? She glared at him and said, "Isn't it right? You have already entered the experimental class for Sister Ning, so you haven't confessed your feelings yet? Or, is it because Sister Ning refuses to accept you?" He actually just said it casually. After all, Sister Ning went to class 2 for him, and it didn't look like she didn't like third brother. Lu Xian, who was unexpectedly told the truth, received a knowing blow. He glared at the other person and said, "What do you know? It's not that she refuses to accept me, it's just that she doesn't plan to fall in love in high school." Statement, don't these all mean the same thing? In his opinion, the third brother just refused to admit it after being rejected. If you don't plan to fall in love in high school, isn't that just a polite way of saying no? They didn't know what kind of silly fun the third brother was having, which made them think that the two of them had finally established a relationship. Lu Xian, what do you know? Rejection means there is no hope at all, and now we are just planning to postpone the time of love. Statement, is that so? Why do I feel that Sister Ning doesn't like you? No matter how you look at the third brother, this seems like he is trying to regain his respect. Do you want to die? Lu Xian's expression was relaxed for 1 second, but his face turned gloomy the next second, and he gritted his teeth and glanced at the other party. Just like a cat whose tail was suddenly stepped on, the whole body of the cat could explode at any time. Shen Yuyo said desperately, "I'm serious. With Sister Ning's temperament, do you really think she cares about other people's opinions? If you really like someone, You won't care if it's puppy love. Lucien. It's so heartbreaking. Why is he here listening to this guy beep? Get out, Lucien kicked the opponent angrily. No, third brother, please listen to what I have to say. It was easy for Shan Shen to find opportunities to laugh at the other party, so he naturally refused to give up easily. I don't want to hear it, otherwise, he is afraid that if he continues to listen, he will be tempted to beat him up. The statement does not have the slightest sense of being on the verge of death. Instead, there is an urge to speak the more the other party doesn't want to hear. I think you may need to keep working hard, but maybe it's because Sister Ning heard you say you didn't like her before, so she was punishing you on purpose. He was also reminding the other party of the slap in the face in disguise. I think you seem quite happy, Lucien gritted his teeth and gave the other party a pitiful look. At any rate, everyone knows each other since he wears crotchless pants. How could he not know what this kid is thinking? It's a lot of fun to watch the excitement, and I'm not afraid that extreme joy will lead to sadness. Is there any? Zhang Xiang grinned with a big smile and had no idea what restraint meant. I just want to help you out of the kindness of my heart because I'm seeing third brother that you've finally come to your senses. Isn't it too much to watch the fun by the way? Lucien sneered twice in his heart, put a hand on his shoulder, narrowed his narrow eyes and said, it seems that you understand quite well. Why not do this? Let's find a place where no one is around to be alone. Discuss. Haha, Shangzi finally felt the danger belatedly, and said with a smile, this is not necessary. Lucien, no, I think it's necessary. Let's go. After saying that, he directly wrapped his arms around the other person's neck and dragged him to the nearby woods. End of this chapter. The School Sweetheart Soft Green Plum is Sweet and Wild. Author, Pearfish. Chapter 157. Chapter 157 Indescribable. A few minutes later, Lucien walked out of it refreshed, followed by a limping statement. Fortunately, it was two men. If it had been a man and a woman, they might have been mistaken for doing something indescribable in the woods for 2 days. She breathed in and rubbed her buttocks, hissing, the third brother's attack was too harsh. Sure enough, a lovelorn man couldn't afford to offend him. What's wrong with you two? Lu Ning and Jian Nian came out a little later and asked in confusion when they saw their appearance. No, let's discuss life. Lucien then glanced at the direction of the statement, stretched out his hand to hook the other person's shoulder, with a smile on his face, but a warning in his eyes, right. Sister Ning. She opened her mouth and wanted to complain to Lu Ning, but when she saw the look in Lucien's eyes, she swallowed back her words of complaint with frustration. Yes, right. Lu Ning's eyes swept across the faces of the two people, always feeling that these two people were strange, but she did not continue to ask further questions. The group of people walked towards the cafeteria. They met Yang Anning and Su Xia on the road. The latter glanced at the direction of Lu Ning and Lucien and couldn't help but cursed, some people are so shameless, flirting, and flirting. Because of the rumors during the summer vacation, everyone originally thought that Lu Ning and Song Tingzi were together. Who knew that as soon as school started, they heard that she had transferred from class 1 to class 2 for Lucien, so she was once again in the school. Ship rumors. Su Xia had always disliked Lu Ning, but when she saw the two of them, she remembered those rumors and couldn't help blurting them out. But her voice was not low, and everyone in Lu Ning's group heard it. Jian Nian immediately responded, who are you shamelessly scolding? In fact, Su Xia regretted it as soon as she said it. She regretted that she was too impulsive. After all, she didn't take advantage of what happened last time, especially in front of An and his friends when they landed. They might not know what they thought of her. Moreover, there are many people on the other side, and if a commotion breaks out, you won't be able to take advantage. Having said it all, it is impossible to take it back. I can only bite the bullet and say, I'm not scolding you. What does it have to do with you? Jian, you were scolding us in our direction, but you still said you weren't scolding us? What, you dare to say but you don't want to admit it? Who says I don't dare to admit it anymore? Susuya blushed immediately and said, whoever is shameless knows it well. Jian raised his eyebrows and said, I'm sorry, we really don't know yet. How about you explain it to us? Susuya, explain what? Jian, just explain, who are you shamelessly calling? Susuya couldn't get off the tiger for a while, and once again regretted that she shouldn't have said too much. It's not right to explain now, and it's not right not to explain. I felt so angry that I couldn't do it. Finally, his eyes fell in the direction of Luning, who was standing aside, and gritted his teeth and said, shameless, you're just scolding her, right? Who among the people in number 1 middle school doesn't know that she has two things to do? She has a pure face, but she does the most shameless thing. Jian smiled when he heard this, just know that you are shameless. What do you mean? Susuya was stunned by her smile. Jian smiled slightly and said, we all know that shameless is cursing people, but she doesn't seem to know it, so I kindly reminded her. Susuya felt like she was almost stunned by the other party, but one thing was very clear, that is, the other party was scolding her. He couldn't help but think about what the other party had just said twice before he realized it. He was so angry that his nose was crooked. He pointed at Jian and said, you. End of this chapter. The School Sweetheart Soft Green Plum is Sweet and Wild. Author, Pearfish. Chapter 158. Chapter 158, Why should we spare others if we are justified? Jian didn't give the other person a chance to speak, and yelled back again, what are you? Your mother never taught you not to point your finger at others. You haven't even wiped off the on your body, and you have the nerve to talk about others. Why, did you forget the lesson from last time so quickly? Then her eyes glanced at Yang Anning next to her. I originally thought that you would at least learn to be smarter after what happened last time, but it seems that I overestimated you. I didn't expect that you are still so stupid, and you are always being used as a weapon by others. He also always likes to be around certain people. Be careful of counting the money for them if you are sold. When Jian said that, Yang Anning couldn't help but frown. She didn't say a word just now, so why did the other party think that she was the instigator? At the same time, she couldn't help but secretly blame Susuya for not being able to control her mouth. Why would she always provoke the other party when there was nothing wrong? Susuya also realized that her behavior had caused Yang Anning around her to be misunderstood, so she hurriedly said, don't accuse people unfairly. It's because I can't stand some people, and it has nothing to do with Ning. Can't stand it? Why can't you stand it? Jian laughed angrily, have we provoked you? Do we need you to suddenly jump out and bite people like a mad dog? Who are you calling a mad dog? Susuya said but couldn't criticize the other person, and couldn't scold the other person. She was holding her breath and almost drove herself crazy. Jian sneered, I know who is who. Susuya gritted her teeth and said, Jian, I'm talking about Luning. It has nothing to do with you. You said I was being used as a weapon, but I think you were the one being used as a weapon. After saying that, she glanced at Luning. Direction, why else didn't she speak out on her own, instead of asking you to stand up for her? I think she is the biggest white lotus. Jian easily saw through the other party's provocation tactics, not to mention that the other party used the same tactics that he had just used on her. Immediately he replied, that's because we Ning are generous and don't bother to argue with you, but I am different. I can't stand the self-righteousness of some people. They always like to stand on the moral high ground and judge others. We treat ourselves as saints. But I don't know. In the eyes of others, she is the clown. You, Don't go too far. Susuya couldn't help but clench her hands hanging by her sides, feeling more and more regretful about provoking the other party. In the end, the person who was embarrassed was himself. Did I say something wrong? Jian asked with raised eyebrows. Seeing that more and more people were watching around her, Susuya gritted her teeth and said, yes, I admit that I shouldn't have commented on her just now, but you don't have to be rude. Ha, Jian smiled, I want to fight for 3 points even if it's unreasonable. Why should I spare someone if I'm right? You, Susuya was blocked until she was speechless. What are you, I want to tell you, shut up if you can't speak in the future. If you don't speak, no one will treat you as a mute. Of course, if you are willing to give your face to others, others will not treat you. You are polite. After all, no one will spoil you. Susuya couldn't speak to the other person at all, her face turned black and red, and she wanted to yell at the other person to shut up. Yang Anning next to her couldn't stand the looks of the people watching, and said to her with a cold face, okay, let's go, it's so embarrassing. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The School Sweetheart Soft Green Plum is sweet and wild. Author, Pearfish. Chapter 159. Chapter 159. Do you want to vent your anger on your behalf? Yang Anning finished speaking and turned around first. Susuya couldn't help but froze. She looked at the other person and opened her mouth. In the end, she didn't say a word and left with the other person. Looking at the embarrassed figures of the two people, Shen Yu gave a thumbs up to Jian and said, as expected of Master Nian, with such eloquence, it would be a pity not to participate in the debate competition. Jian snorted softly and said, are you afraid? If you are, please stop messing with me. Shen Yu felt sad, how dare I? You and Sister Ning are both heroes among women, I can't afford to offend you. No wonder even Confucius said that only women and villains are difficult to raise. The ancients would not deceive me. Can't afford to offend, can't afford to offend. After saying that, he turned to look at Lu Ning. Sister Ning, that girl said that to you just now, why aren't you angry? Aren't you angry? Of course not, I just know that getting angry is useless. Besides, the angrier you are, the prouder the other person will be. After all, isn't the other party's purpose just to make you angry? Not to mention. Lu Ning turned to look at Lu Xian. As early as when the two were in the same class, she had guessed that someone would talk about it. Lu Xian met her gaze, raised his hand and rubbed her head, and said, would you like to vent your anger for you? Forget it, she didn't get any advantage, we can't let this guy beat someone up. As for other ways to vent your anger, I guess the other party can't think of any other way. Besides, why didn't you speak for me just now that everyone had left? It was a bit of hindsight to say that he wanted to help her vent her anger. Didn't we find no chance? Lu Xian spread his hands. Jian on the side realized that he had snatched the third brother's opportunity to perform. I'm sorry, third brother, I was just too angry. Don't worry, next time I have to vent my anger for Ning Ning, I will let you do it. Lu Ning twitched the corner of her mouth and said, can't you two just hope that I'll be better? Jian hugged her arm with a smile and said, I'm afraid this is unavoidable. Who made you so good? You are destined to be jealous. Okay, let's go eat. Lu Ning. Should she still feel honored by such a thing? They arrived a little late today, and the canteen was full of people. At first glance, it was packed to the brim. Lu Xian took one look and said to Lu Ning, go and sit down, and I'll help you get food. After saying that, he walked towards the window where the queue was. Third brother, why didn't you ask what you wanted to eat? Jian turned to Lu Ning and asked. Shen Yu on the side interjected, you don't know this, right? Sister Ning eats at the same table with third brother every day. Third brother probably knows better than Sister Ning himself what she likes to eat. They have several holidays and weekends. I often go to the third brother's house to have dinner, so I naturally know that Sister Ning eats at the third brother's house every day. Not to mention that the third brother's dishes are all Sister Ning's favorite dishes. Having been eating at the same table for several years, if the third brother still doesn't know what Sister Ning likes to eat, it would be a waste of time for him to be a childhood sweetheart. Jian Nian hugged Lu Ning's arm and said with starry eyes, "I'm so envious. I really want to have a childhood sweetheart who lives next door and takes care of backpacks and meals." "Don't be envious. You have no chance in this life. Just wait until the next life." Shen Yu hit her rudely and said, "If you don't line up, not only will you not have a childhood sweetheart to help you prepare food, I'm afraid you won't even have food. It hurts my heart." End of this chapter. The School Sweetheart Soft Green Plum is Sweet and Wild. Author, Pearfish. Chapter 160. Chapter 160. Otherwise, I can wipe it for you. Lu Ning searched around and finally found an empty seat, but there was already someone sitting at this table, and it was another male protagonist at the center of a topic related to her, Song Tingzi. When you see the other person, you will know why the seats next to him and opposite him are vacant. Although there are many girls who like him, this guy always looks like he should not be approached by strangers. Girls want to get closer, but they are afraid of annoying the other person by being too proactive. If they are chased away in front of the other person, it will only increase the embarrassment. Boys understand better. No one wants to be with someone who is much better than themselves. This also creates a situation where no one else sits at the other party's table except him. But it's a benefit to myself. Lu Ning stepped forward and said, "Do you mind if I sit here?" Song Tingzi raised his head and glanced at her, nodded and said, "Sit down." As soon as Lu Ning sat down opposite him, she felt countless strong gazes from around her. She seems to be creating a topic for everyone again, but this time, her deliberate avoidance makes people feel more problematic. It's better to be calm. Song Tingzi only glanced at her, then lowered his head and continued eating. After a while, Lu Xian came over with the rice bowl. He paused slightly when he saw Song Tingzi sitting opposite her, but soon sat down next to her as if nothing had happened. First he skillfully picked the chopped green onions and fat meat from her bowl into his own bowl, and then took out a can of drink from his pocket. After opening it, he put a straw in it and put it in her hand. The series of movements are done very skillfully and naturally, and you can tell at a glance that they are done regularly. Even Song Tingzi, who was sitting opposite, was not allowed to raise his head and glance at him. By the time Jian Nian came over with the rice, only the seat next to Song Tingzi was left. The girl's eyes immediately lit up, and she shamelessly sat down next to Song Tingzi despite the envy and hatred of everyone. She also winked at Lu Ning, as expected of good sisters. "Okay, the more good things like this the better in the future." Lu Ning. This girl hasn't given up yet. I haven't seen her move for so long, I thought she had given up. At the beginning, the girl knew how to be restrained, and secretly looked at each other while eating. In the end, her eyes became more and more unrestrained, and her eyes were almost stuck directly on the other person's face. This girl was so blatant that even Lu Ning couldn't stand her in the end and couldn't help but cough lightly to remind her to restrain herself. Turns out, the girl was so absorbed in what she was watching that she didn't even hear it. Lu Ning had no choice but to raise her voice and cough a few more times. The latter finally reacted, raised his head and looked at her blankly and said, "Ning Ning, what's wrong with you? Did you drink too fast and choked?" Then he looked at Lu Xian, "Third brother, why didn't you help Ning Ning? Sister, pat me." Lu Ning couldn't hold it back and spit out a mouthful of drink. Others were fine, but Song Tingzi, who was sitting opposite her, suffered a disaster. There were several watermarks on the white shirt on his chest. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean it." Lu Ning couldn't help but froze, and hurriedly picked up a tissue to wipe the other person's face. However, before his hands touched the other party's clothes, Lu Xian pulled him back by his sleeves. "It's not like he doesn't have hands." Lu Xian took the tissue from Lu Ning's hand and threw it to the other party. "What are you doing?" Lu Ning glared at the other person. Lu Xian spread his hands and said, "I didn't do anything." Then he looked at Song Tingzi and said, "How about I wipe it for you?" He stood up. End of this chapter.